Lingana, stories from Eastern Province, Zambia. Episode 5, Isaac. One afternoon, when I was back in the UK, I got a WhatsApp from a friend in Eastern Zambia. Catherine Munyansho was the first person who I really got to know the first year that I stayed at the lodge. She asked me early on about the Namaste greeting I gave her. I told her it meant, I acknowledge you as my sister in this world where we are all equal. Maybe I felt it was important because the European director, a white person, treated people badly, like they were inferior. And I didn't want it that she was the yardstick by which Zambians measured Europeans. Ever after that, Catherine called me brother and I called her sister, despite our difference in years. We walked and talked, often going up Mount Pangwe looking for mushrooms. She was crazy about them. That afternoon, her text just said, "I'm so sorry, my brother. Isaac Kazembe is no more." This is the story of Isaac, my brother and friend. We didn't start off as friends. Isaac ran the stores at the lodge. He always sat at the same seat at the head of the big table in veranda, the large half-open communal space. He was maybe early 70s, but his face was unlined, wise and cynical at the same time. I immediately knew I had to get to know this person if possible. So I would politely ask if I could sit at that table sometimes. He would wave a hand at a chair. Then the sparring, the verbal jousting would start. "You people, you whites, you came to my country, thought you could just take it over." Wasn't me, Isaac. Don't include me with the colonial British just because I'm from that country. But he had a twinkle in his eye all the time, and a chuckle in his voice, waiting to bubble out. And slowly, I pulled stories out of him. Saw what a big person he was, although in stature he was quite small and slight. He started to accept me, and our interactions lost their sparring quality until one day I saw that he was as pleased to see me as I was to see him. I wish I'd found out more about his ancestry. He told me bits here and there, but our conversation was always so vibrant that there was so many things I never got to ask him. I know he was from the family of a chief, so in his own culture, in his early years, he was treated like royalty. But the British came, and they did their best to destroy the tribal hierarchy. They told the people straight out, you can't call the head of your tribe a king anymore. There's only one monarch now in the UK. The Chewa, one of the dominant tribes of eastern Zambia, had their king imprisoned apparently. Later released on condition that he was called paramount chief instead of king. And that remains his title to this day, as Zambia is now a republic with a president. But tribal culture was too deeply entrenched to be destroyed, and continues to be a big part of people's life outside of the urban centres. The story is very different for urban dwellers as far as I have seen. Lusaka, for example, is thoroughly cosmopolitan, and that is where Isaac Kazembe spent his younger years. He still carried the status and pride of being from a chief's family. You can tell by the way he described events from his life at that time. I picked up bits here and there in our conversation, but there was never the opportunity to stop him and say, okay, now I need to know all about that time, because he was already off on another story, and then I'd forget that thread. He got a job with the Meteorological Office of Zambia. But because it was the domain mostly of whites, any black people that were cleverer than them got edged out. That's what happened to Isaac, and he ended up working in the railways. He hated the colonizers. For me, it was a first-hand description of living with racists. I'm so far away from the concept that there's a difference between people because of the color of their skin. Remember, my almost daughter Ketty and her mother Alice, one of my dearest friends, are tropical dark. But to me, that's beautiful. The nearest I get to racism is kids on the compound, or maybe an adult in from the bush staring at me open-mouthed. But that's innocence, not racism. All of us arrive on planet Earth, we know not how. You're born into a rich family, you a poor one. You have pink skin, you have dark. I don't think it's realistic to pretend that you're better than someone else when you don't even know how you came here in the first place. If you have religious beliefs or you're into reincarnation or something, you'll have some pretty solid theories about that stuff, but there's still a mystery at the heart. How did you get to exist? Okay, rant over. It does occur to me that it can be fun to focus on differences sometimes. Yeah, like in a football match, where hopefully we're having some fun. I support this team, you that one. Or admiration, like you say, oh, I wish I had curly hair like you. I remember once sitting in a hall at the lodge watching big screen TV, Zambia playing football in the Africa's Cup against a team from Arabic Northern Africa. The hall was packed. The aforementioned Catherine Monyansho sitting next to me, and she remarked in a quiet spell, "We're very dark, aren't we?" Causing a room full of Zambians and one white guy, me, to fall about laughing. That was tongue-in-cheek delight at the differences. But I didn't know racism still goes on in the United States. Also in parts of the UK, I've encountered blatant, irrational racism. The irony for Isaac was that he was probably far more intelligent than the idiots who were treating him as a second-class citizen in his own country. But he was proud, and he was in Lusaka in the early days of the Republic, which was declared in 1964. He told that there were still whites-only bars. The young Republic was in transition. And when they said, "No, you can't be in here," he'd tell them to go to hell. Zambia was a republic now, and who wanted to try and throw him out? And of course everyone did, so a drunken brawl would ensue. The Lusaka police got very used to Isaac spending the night in the cells, but they'd let him out in the morning until the next time. I picked up bits in the conversation that Isaac loved his women and the good life. His face in older years still carried a handsomeness, and despite hardships in his life, he carried himself with pride and dignity when I met him. He laughed a lot remembering those days. It resonated very much with me. We could have been brothers, except I was rubbish at fighting, so I never did so after I left school. write down Isaac's stories back in my room at the lodge after he told them to me. I know my memory, so it was very necessary if I wasn't going to forget them completely or lose the detail, the nuances as he told that story. This tale comes from his times in the railways and was told to him by the fireman in the story. Here's what I wrote, exactly as it appears on my blog, lingana.com, as the post Black Humour. It also has my poetic license applied to the text. That's my writing style. Isaac and I drink tea together as he reminisces. Rhodesia and Nyasaland. That was the name for what became Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi. I think if I'd been around at the time, I would have been one of the English who went native. According to Isaac, there were many of them. Marry a Zambian woman, blend into the scenery. But the other Mzungus, whites, well, lots of them stayed on in positions of authority, effectively operating social apartheid, even after Northern Rhodesia was history and Kenneth Kaunda became the first president of Zambia. So, Isaac was edged out of the meteorological service in Lusaka, despite his knowledge and training, and shunted into the railways, whence the source of our afternoon stories today. It seems that social apartheid even applied in the cab of the Zambian Railways steam locomotive. Fairly obvious stuff. Driver, white. Fireman, black. Friendly banter to while away the long journey? No way. Glances at the plume rising from the smokestack, falling like a barometer as this train starts losing power. That's all. Maybe a raised eyebrow at the fireman, if he hasn't already jumped into action. Not a, hey brother, let's get some coal in the box, eh? Get some steam up, drive this beast a bit faster, I say. Nope, just the merest glance, serving as a demand for some serious shoveling. Thus, Isaac paints the scenery, the backdrop to our story. One morning, the driver, badly hung over, usual pack of supplies, food and drink, forgotten in a bleary rush to get to his locomotive on time. Now, the fireman's okay, got his supplies for the long trip, no problem. Driver sees him swigging from his water bag, and he rues the absence of his own, constantly reminded of his thirst by the fetid post-alcohol dryness on his swollen, sorry tongue. A signal stops them. Driver breaks silence as he brings the train to a halt. Store over there, go get me cigarettes. As the fireman goes on the errand, the driver takes a big swig of the other guy's water. A black man's water bag, unthinkable to a racist bigot white guy unless he's desperate. Fireman returns, no cigarettes. So this happens twice more, each time a long draft from the water bag down the driver's illicitly demanding throat. His taste buds are so blasted by the previous night's drinking extravaganza with his white mates that he doesn't even realise the fireman's carrying grade A home-brewed hooch, a cloudy beer with the clout of kerosene. Firemen can handle it. Hard work, sweat, familiarised and accomplished liver cells scurrying to the detox party with a plum. But driver, he's already on the ropes from last night's bout with the booze. Well, people still talk about the locomotive that lurched and staggered into the station that day, breaking with a sodden alcoholic sigh. The last act of an unlikely victim of apartheid just before he surrenders to encroaching coma. Isaac had a family way over in the west, Copperbelt somewhere. When I knew him, he lived with his second wife on the compound, just near Alice. I don't really know how he ended up working at that lodge, but when we had got to know each other, we would laugh at the antics and posturings of the director. He was very diplomatic, though, and would take her reprimands on the chin. He knew this was probably his only chance of work now. But his language was full of expressions that he'd heard way back from the English overlords. So if he was summoned by the director, he'd smile resignedly and say, "Okay, let me go and receive a tongue lashing." And it was said with such relish that I'd crack up laughing. Another of his favourite words for the director's tirades was, "I was given a good lambasting." There's a word you don't hear these days. One Saturday afternoon, I came over and sat down. "Isaac, I think there's a fight happening down near the hall. Should I try and intervene?" He listened intently for the noise that I'd heard, then laughed. "Tony, those people are having a church service. They are Christians. But their worship involves a lot of shouting at their God. I think it must be because he lives very far away, so they have to shout loudly to make themselves heard." One day, Isaac told me he had procured bacon and eggs. He knew they were eaten by the English for breakfast and would like to invite me over one morning for the meal. Beautiful. So I did. And his wife cooked those eggs and bacon on the charcoal brazier with toast and beans and tea. I don't usually eat breakfast, but how could I refuse? And oh my, it was delicious. He had a problem with his hip, so walking could be difficult. But then one day he slipped and fell and was crippled with pain. An X-ray showed a longitudinal fracture of the femur at the hip joint. Difficult at the best of times, but with only a rudimentary bush hospital available, there was nothing that could be done. He had to sit all the time in his porch, where I would visit him most days, hoping that perhaps the bone might mend. Then it was time for me to go that year, and I'll never forget the occasion, sitting in his house. I remember Alice was with me, and Isaac and I were saying our farewells. "I will sing for you," he said, then astonished us by coming out with a beautiful tenor voice, singing of how great is love between brothers. He was now an elder of his church, one of the many Christian churches, and was used to singing songs of divine love, I guess. But that song came from the heart. It moved me greatly. That was the last time I saw Isaac Kazembe. Back in the UK, he texted me to say the pain was now much worse. I asked if he was prepared to travel. He said yes. So I sent funds for a taxi to Lusaka and consultations with doctors in one of the big hospitals. Eventually, they said nothing could be done, and he had to endure 7 hours of painful trip all the way back. Sometime later, he was going to the local hospital for some pain treatment. Even the small journey now was a nightmare for him, and his big heart made its final protest in a massive heart attack. Gone, out of pain. I remember everything about that afternoon. Catherine's text pinging in out of the blue. I'm so sorry, my brother. Isaac Kazembe is no more. I made this music for him. I just remembered Isaac and composed. Maybe it reflects the fact that he wouldn't have been out of place in a European piano bar or a backstreet dive in Lusaka or Kinshasa. I'm proud he was my friend.